Well, welcome to the fifth of 5 videos looking at how to monitor and control a traditional project management project. And what we're going to do during this particular video is look at problem escalation and how do you handle issues that arise during a particular project. All right, one of the first things is managing this idea of a scope bank. So you've got between 5 and 10% of the total labor days. You're going to put it in a scope bank, and then all of the kind of features and functions get dumped in there. And then what happens is the client kind of controls this process. So there's this capability of saying these are the most important of the changes in the bank, and you can add them to the project and then make determinations of what is in scope, what's out of scope. But you've created this capability for the client to make decisions and to at the same time be constrained to 5-10% of the project in terms of what those changes are going to be. Now, with different types of project management life cycles, you're going to have different sizes with scope banks in terms of how you control it and how structured it is, because again, project management life cycle models have different tolerances associated with change management. So again, the client can reduce scope, can increase scope, and that allows them to manage the scope bank, can prioritize what's actually inside of the scope of a particular project. All right, as you're working through the project and you're doing this monitoring and controlling, you want to maintain an issues log. This lists a couple of the characteristics associated with a particular issues log. Should be relatively straightforward, so not going to spend a lot of time on an issues log. Do want to go back and re-emphasize this idea of a 15-minute daily status meeting and the importance of doing this meeting. Talk a little bit about this idea of rotating the meeting facilitator, so it's not always the project manager. Everyone gets to buy in. And this idea of, are you on schedule, ahead of schedule, behind schedule, and then, how are you going to catch up? And then that leads to an update of the scope bank and leads to an update of the issues log that you're tracking for a particular project. Project management meeting is going to take place only if there's an issue that requires resolution. And again, you don't bring everybody into this, but you're trying to bring the affected parties, agree on what the issue is, who owns it, look at the possible solutions, prioritize those, make a decision, then update the issues log and schedule the next meeting to move things forward. As you're making those decisions, we're going to reach way back in the videos and in the book. And remember this idea of a scope triangle? There it is. Here are your trade-offs. So, you want to be looking at mechanisms where you can trade off time, cost, resource availability, where you may trade off scope and quality, and that's a client decision. But all of these kind of roll together. And you have to figure out, well, who's going to make the decision? What things do we have that we can trade off so that the client is satisfied with the particular project? When you break these down, you've got things that a project manager can do, things that a resource manager can do, and things that are more client-based. For the project manager, sometimes no action is the best action. The problem's going to self-correct. You've got people working on it, and there's no intervention needed. Sometimes you want to go back and look at different dependencies and see, can I change some things around? Can I decompose a task, for example? And then that allows me to address a particular issue. And then finally, you may want to look at, from a project manager-based strategies, at reassigning resources. So you may have some slack over in a different project, or different task, and you may want to reassign that resource. So you may have a more experienced resource, or you may want to bring in contract resources. So again, those are components where a project manager can do that reassignment component. The resource manager is going to negotiate additional resources working with the project manager. And again, this allows you to address issues and problems that arise during a particular project. And then finally, the client can intervene and negotiate either a multiple release or a reduction in scope or a schedule extension. And a great example of this is a project I'm working on right now The project is a business intelligence project. Started back in February, was supposed to be done in December, and by that point, really had serious challenges and with the project. And it was a more traditional project with a linear development. And what ended up happening is the project came to a close. The client, myself, refused to close the project. Me and the project manager talked about it, and they brought the project team back. We did a 2-week intensive intervention, probably about 25 people working on the project, with 5 coming from the consultant firm and 20 coming from inside my organization itself. Made significant progress, but we really didn't get to the point. So we entered into a second round of negotiations, and then they brought in a second team, and a team that had not worked the project before, and they're now working on the project for 6 weeks. Both of the interventions were done at no cost, and so you can see all 3 of these strategies beginning to fire, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The project manager intervened and reassigned resources the first time around during the first intervention. During the second intervention, they negotiated additional resources coming in to work on the particular project. And I haven't discussed this yet, but as a client, I reduced scope and I extended the time associated with the project. And what ended up is a very happy client and a project team that is looking forward to doing additional business with us by making this kind of strategic investment in this particular account. When you look at the escalation hierarchy, what you want to be able to do is to kind of work down this path, and you want to involve the client as a last resort. So this idea of reducing scope or schedule extension is going to be the last thing you're going to do. A multiple release strategy may address the need as well. But the first 4 there are all things that you're going to be able to do internal. Schedule slack's going to correct a problem, or this kind of finish start dependencies can be changed so that you can do some schedule compression. You may be able to break tasks down into smaller groups and address an issue. Reassign resources from a non-critical path task to coverage, whatever the slippage is, or negotiate additional resources. You just kind of work down this path, and I think it's fairly straightforward in terms of what you're trying to accomplish by escalating and addressing the issue with minimal impact on the client. All right. When you get to the point of gaining approval to close the project, that means that you've ready to transition to the next phase. And keep in mind, this is a little bit more complex than you might, imagine just looking at the simplistic slide. When you get into some of the more agile and extreme project management lifecycle models, you're going to come to this point of gaining approval to close the project multiple times during the project. You may be on a 4-week sprint, and every 4 weeks you're going to come back to this point and say, do we close, do we close, do we close? And then on other projects that are more linear, you'll come to this point only once. And you'll have to make this decision only once. So while it looks simplistic, it's not. It depends on what project management lifecycle model you're using. All right, well, very good. Guess what? This brings us to the end of the 5th of 5 videos. During this video, we looked at project escalation, and what we're going to do during the next video is start looking at closing out a project. So keep on studying, keep on learning, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.